Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our seminar on business recovery planning. Thank you for that introduction. Made me sound very smart. I've represented the BMA on the National Advisory for Safety and Health, National Advisory Committee on Safety and Health for about the last 15 or so years. And so there's been a long-term relationship with the BMA, and it's a good opportunity now to share some knowledge that I have on business recovery planning. As stated earlier, my name is Pete Collett. I've put my telephone number up there should you wish to call me. If you embark on a project to set up a business recovery plan, and I've also put my email address up there, so please feel free to call me or get in touch with me. This presentation will be made available through the BMA, so again, you can call Sade, and I'm sure she'll make sure it's available if anybody wishes to have a copy. I should say I'm ably assisted today by Robin Harrison, who's sorted out all manner of IT issues for me this morning, as well as will be demonstrating and showcasing some of the BRC Hurricane products. But first of all, I'd like to kind of explain how I got into business recovery planning. Many years ago, I was operations manager for Atlantis Submarines, and obviously during the hurricane season, we wanted to safeguard the vessels and the submarine. The vessels weren't too difficult because we could just lift them out, but the submarine was a challenge because the crane in the port wasn't able to lift the weight of the submarine. And so basically we had to take about 24 hours removing 7 tons of lead from the base of the submarine and a number of other items in order that the submarine could be lifted safely by the crane. So as operations manager, it was my job to document that and make sure it all went to plan, and obviously at the end of it, reverse it all and put it back in the water safely. On many occasions, we spent 24 hours doing all the preparatory things for lifting the submarine out of the water. Then we'd lift it out, then we'd transport it, then we'd put it on the dock somewhere, and we'd cover it down, and we'd all go home, and the next day there were blue skies, birds were singing, and we had to put the whole thing back in the water again and reverse the whole process. So we did it quite a few times. But obviously it was an expensive asset, and you need to protect it. Now, fast forward about 15 years, and I was employed by BRC, and shortly after joining BRC, management was called together of the different companies, and we were told that we would need a business recovery plan. And everybody had to kind of state if they had any involvement in any of these kind of practices, and I acknowledged my bit that I'd done for Atlantis Submarines, and so they said, right, you're it. And that's how I come to be stood here, giving you this briefing on business recovery planning. So with that, we will move forward. So the objectives today are basically to understand what a business recovery plan is, to appreciate the need for a business recovery plan, and then also to introduce the basics on how to put one together. So my first question to you guys is, does anybody have a business recovery plan? All right, so we've got some work to do then. As I say, the plan that I'm going to talk about is fairly basic. It's fairly easy to apply. It's basically a series of checklists in order that you can prepare for an event. So collectively, businesses in Barbados, our biggest threat is obviously that of hurricane. That's what we all think about when we think about the business recovery plan. A big storm come in and doing some serious damage to the island, and obviously businesses too. We're long overdue. We have had a couple of small hurricanes nip past. But I think one of the problems that we've had in Barbados for a long time is the fact that of complacency. The fact that people say God's a Bajan and hurricanes flip round Barbados, they turn away at the last minute, they miss us completely, they turn north, they drop south, and everybody else catches some of it, but Barbados has been very lucky. The last major hurricane, 1955, and we had Thomas a few years ago, along with, what was the latest one? Elsa. Yeah. So, but again, complacency, I think, affects a lot of people and businesses because we've got used to these events not really occurring in Barbados. So basically, complacency is a feeling of quiet pleasure or security, often while unaware of some potential danger, a smug satisfaction with an existing condition. So what we need to do is we need to break that mold. We need to acknowledge that things are not as they used to be, that weather systems now are extreme, worldwide, from extreme heat to extreme cold. So the world, as we know, is changing. This is a picture of hurricane and storm tracks. The Atlantic tracks are recorded storms and hurricanes over the last 170 years. Now you can see these things that occur regularly. And we're right in the alley where many of the storms come into the Caribbean. We have been lucky in the past, but this is not sustainable. We are in a highway of hurricanes, and it's more through luck than judgment that these things have not occurred in Barbados. So basically, when we talk about a business recovery plan, we're looking at preparatory activities and plans that seek to reduce incidents of injury, damage, resulting from natural disasters or from some form of threat. So it's very much preparing. A business recovery plan doesn't cost a lot. In fact, it costs very little. The cost really is in time and in documenting your observations and doing risk appraisals prior to the arrival of a weather system. Once again, global warming is a fact. We've seen extreme weather conditions throughout the world. Atlantic seawater temperatures are increasing, which means that hurricanes are going to form more often, and as they move into the Caribbean Sea, probably form even stronger and stronger hurricanes than we've seen previously. Over the last few years, we've seen Category 4 and Category 5 hurricanes, which have basically gone across islands and totally trashed them. So this is the reality of where we are. Just for the record for this year, this is the NOAA predictions. They're saying it's going to be a a very high chance of an above average hurricane season. Now, above average is kind of based on an historical average. So they are stating that we will get more hurricanes and storms, 13 to 16 named storms, 6 to 8 hurricanes, and 2 to 3 major hurricanes. Now, this is a prediction, so it could be less and it could be more. But obviously every year it seems a high chance of an above average hurricane season. That seems to be the norm. So things are changing and we have to get real about how we protect our businesses from this imminent threat. So obviously if we prepare, then we are better able to weather the storm, to prepare our businesses, and the other thing is to ensure that we can return to operation very quickly as well. We need to be responsive. And the businesses that will survive are obviously the ones that are prepared and have done the homework and done the correct preparations before the arrival of a weather system. So it's in our interest. And as I said before, it's not an expensive process to do, but we all need to do it if we value our businesses. And also there is the point of being able to supply our customers, not only from a business point of view, but from a social responsibility point of view. People want food, people want roofing. People may want these things very quickly after a weather system has passed through. So we have a social responsibility as well as a responsibility to our businesses. And how does the recovery plan work? Well, as we said before, it's to be proactive. While you have the time, think about the things that you need to do. So that when you need to do them, it's already been reviewed, communicated to your staff, everybody knows what to do. You've got, you've done your risk appraisals and your hazard appraisals, and you know what you think you need to do in order to prepare for an imminent storm. And again, I continue to talk about the hurricane or the storm, but there are other threats as well, which we can talk about briefly as we go forward. The other thing as well about being proactive is that it forces you to make detailed plans. So it's not just a generic shut the doors, close the windows. It means you can get very, very specific about the plans that you make. So these are the, in very broad stages of readiness, response and recovery. So when we look at Barbados as a country, these are the stages that we would go through as relates to kind of preparatory work and then recovery work. The first one, mitigation, and then we've got preparation, then we've got response, recovery and rehabilitation, and then reconstruction. So obviously they're on a time scale. Mitigation very much before a weather system arrives. And these are infrastructural preparations. So things like conforming to building codes, building buildings that conform to hurricane readiness, reinforced buildings, correct type of roofing, secured correctly, use of hurricane straps as a push for a BRC product, and BRC shutters too. So just the idea of having established building codes can lead to obviously a stronger nation. Flood barriers. We don't have too many rivers in Barbados, but you know, it's something that may need to be considered in certain places. Adequate drainage to avoid flooding. The choice of location. When you set your business up, you need to think about what threats are there in that location, because it's not something that you can change quickly. It's part of the whole planning process, but obviously it's very much advanced planning. And then when we look at kind of closer to the event, we have a visitor. When we look closer to the event, there's things like hurricane shutters that you can retrofit to your building, things like raising machinery off the ground if you're in a floodplain kind of area, structural retrofits to buildings to reinforce things. These are all things that can be done in advance, but it's not like a major change in business code or in building code or something like that. So these are kind of additions that you can make to your business. Before the visitation of a weather system, and this relates more to preparation and scope of a business recovery plan. These are obviously the more immediate things that you may be doing prior to the, excuse me, let me just get rid of this. Prior to the arrival of a weather system, so things like closing up your shutters, boarding up your windows, covering down equipment, storage of key documents, backing up files, security of inventory, and generally securing your property. So these are very generic things that we need to cover within a business recovery plan. And then during the visitation of a storm, well, we very much have to sit back and wait and see what happens and hope that you've done the right thing. Response is usually to emergency and military services to do all the right things to support the nation during that time. But we would be very much hands-off, waiting for the storm to move away. So after the visitation, then we're looking at recovery and rehabilitation. So the most immediate things are the activities that are going to return the island back to normal. So things like light and power will be reconnecting cables or turning power back on. Obviously, in many cases, it's not always a case of power's down. They actually turn power off in order to avoid damage and problems. So restoring power, restoring water, communications, and removing downed trees and things like that that are covering the highways. So these are more immediate responses in order to kickstart the island and start moving forward again. Obviously, from a business recovery planning point of view, and I've highlighted these in yellow just to differentiate them, then it would be returning to work or your place of business, doing a damage assessment and repairing what needs to be repaired, reversing the shutdown process in order to restart the business, and then obviously assisting your staff. You're not to forget the people that help you run your business may also need support as well. So, and then reconstruction, that would obviously lend itself to repairing of buildings, downed walls, missing roofs, damage to infrastructure throughout the island. So these will be the more major repairs should a major hurricane have visited. From the point of view of a business recovery plan, it would be a review of the process. What what did you do, what worked, what didn't work, what unforeseen issues became evident during that storm, what things could you have done better. So that's the opportunity to refine a business recovery plan. So it's not a document that is static. You don't do it and leave it, put it away on a shelf. You've got to revise it every year, you've got to make it current, you've got to learn from your experience and continue and develop it. I can remember reading many years ago when I was doing some research for putting together a business recovery plan. It was saying many of the big financial institutions in Cayman Islands had got extensive business recovery plans. Files and files and files of business recovery plans that had been developed. But nobody knew what they contained, nobody had been trained, the boxes were ticked, but that was the limit of it. So we need to make a document that is active and that is simple and that can be trained, staff can be trained in its use. Because it's no good just having it sat on a shelf and everybody's confused when they need to utilise it. So they are the kind of 5 stages that one would expect with before, during and after hurricane's visitation. So the next part of the presentation really is to look at where do we start? How do we develop a business recovery plan? So one of the first things we need to do is appraising the risk. So where is your risk and where is your exposure? If your workshop, factory is in a floodplain, then you know you may have to prepare for flooding. So it's quite simple. You just need to walk around, look at your business and see where the risk and exposure is. Take the time out to do it. Obviously, building damage. If you're housed in a building that's not seen any kind of attention for many years, with loose roofing sheets, badly corroded purlins, then the very structure in which you're working may be compromised. And so these are the kind of things that you need to look at. Equipment damage. What is the potential for equipment damage? High-tech electronic equipment doesn't like water. A leaking roof above high-tech equipment could be expensive and could delay your bounce back to operation. Documents and electronic records. We need to protect these. Records and paperwork are key things within businesses. It's not just a case of making money now. We've got to keep documents and receipts and invoices and all of that. Accounting information. So all of that needs to be protected. Inventory damage. What kind of inventory do you store? Now, BRC, we've got a few thousand tons of steel coil in the yard, and nobody can steal that because nobody wants it, nobody's got the equipment to process it, and steel doesn't go off. So our inventory is fairly bulletproof. But what is your inventory? It could be flour, it could be sugar, it could be chocolate, it could be anything that may be susceptible to the elements. And does your location have any unique threats? So is it located on a floodplain? Is it close to the sea? And are there any watercourses close by? I know many years ago in St. Lucia we have a sister company, and the banks of a river nearby broke and created a whole heap of damage within the plant because nobody expected the levee to break. and it did. So they now took the initiative to kind of raise machinery up a bit, as well as ensuring that the boundaries to this watercourse were reinforced. So these are the kind of things that we need to be looking at when we're looking at a business recovery plan. And just to put things in context from a health and safety point of view, for those of you who are not really familiar with some of the process of risk appraisal, when you do a risk appraisal, generally there's two things that you look at. Hazard. And hazard is something that has the potential to cause harm. So a bottle of acid, a sharp blade, rotating machinery, that's all got potential for causing injury or harm. And then we need to look at the risk factor, which is what is the likelihood that that hazard will cause harm. So a hazard and risk appraisal within your workplace is not only a good thing from the point of view of health and safety, but it also may guide you to some of the activities that you need to do as a person initiating a business recovery plan. And again, in context of risk, it's not only the likelihood, but it's the magnitude of the effect it could have on your business, either the magnitude of the injury or the magnitude of the effect on your business or the damage that may occur impacting your business. So a basic hazard and risk appraisal is not a bad thing to do. And in looking at hazard and risk, we also need to look beyond hurricane damage. I said earlier that the hurricane, visitation by a hurricane is probably what we all think about when we think about business recovery planning. But we may also, well, we need to also think about other aspects of risk and hazard for your business. Fire, for example. If you've got something particular that you work with, your raw material, that is susceptible to fire damage, then it's a threat to your business. What if your next door neighbours are people that routinely weld steel? There's a potential fire hazard that comes from next door. Things like power failure. If you have a power failure, how does it affect your business? If the power was down for a long time, what are you going to do? Chemical spills. Now these can widely fit into general health and safety risk appraisals, but it is something that will help you protect your business, not only from a health and safety point of view, but the impact of some of these things on the actual business. Seismic activity is something that has occurred in Barbados only a few times over the last 30 odd years to my knowledge, but seemingly there is activity all along the island chain on a fairly regular basis now. So do you need to have an evacuation plan for seismic activity? Kick and Jenny down by Grenada. If that blew, which a few years ago it was bubbling, I believe, what kind of tsunami would that create? And where is your business located? And then at the very bottom there, I got pandemic. I mean, we've just gone through a pandemic that nobody really thought would happen, and it's been catastrophic to businesses, to families, but nobody had really thought about it. We were thinking hurricanes, not pandemics. And even now, safety and health legislation, for example, needs to be reviewed because the pandemic has has been a catalyst for many more people now working from home. But if you're working from home and you trip and fall, is that an accident at work? So there's some interesting questions that come from the very fact of a pandemic, and we need to look at the legal and health and safety aspects of that as well. So it's not just about hurricanes. It's about anything that you see as a threat or a risk to your business. Now, the other thing as well that some people tend to miss is, what is it that your business does? Is it a bakery? Do you make nice chocolates? Is it a coffee shop? Do you make products, snacks? Do you brew beer? What is it that you actually do? And then you've got to think about what will be in demand post-disaster. Disaster in broad terms. And this basically creates a process focus. Now, as far as BRC is concerned, we make welded wire mesh, we make hurricane shutters, we make rebar, we make galvanized wire mesh. But the things that are going to be called for after a hurricane, particularly, is going to be roofing sheets and maybe hurricane straps when people are rebuilding. So our process focus will be almost exclusively on those products. So we're not going to start building hurricane shutters because there's other things to do. All our endeavours will be focused on roofing sheets, because that's what people are going to be needing. So you have to think about what your process focus should be as well, as a manufacturer. As I say, I don't want to be in a position where I've got technical guys fixing a welded wire mesh machine when the roofing machine is down. That's where the focus needs to be. Now, if you were a baker, then what would your product focus be? Nice, cream, fairy cakes, or whatever you want to call them, or bread. People want bread. They're not bothered about fancy creamed iced cakes after a hurricane. They want bread. So, these are the things that you need to think about as manufacturers. What product is most important that we supply in order that, one, you can get the sales, and two, you're doing a social service by giving the market the products that they need to bounce back. So where do we start with this whole process? Well, the first thing you should do is buy a ring binder. All right? They're about $6, very cheap. Buy a ring binder, and that's where the whole thing starts. And then the next thing you need to do is to populate that ring binder. And these are some of the headings that I feel we've developed over time through experience, and also they are key kind of components of a business recovery plan. So again, there are a few chapters, as it were, but it's nothing that's too difficult to amass or put together. So these are basically the headings that we've got in our business recovery plan, which is, one is general information, two, communications listing, pre-event tasks and checklists, contingency items, post-event tasks and checklists, damage control evaluation, and staff well-being evaluation. So we'll look at these in a little more detail. So the general information, things like storm tracking maps, where you can listen to the radio and you can find out that the storm is at 13.7, blah, 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 55.8, whatever it is, and you can track things on a map if you don't have access to TV or CNN or whoever. The other thing is hurricane information. What is a hurricane watch? What is a storm watch? So you need to know these terms because they're not everyday terms, and you may only hear them for a few months a year, but you need to know what they mean, and especially if you're managing a business, because they all have an implication on your business. So by putting this information together, you're actually, you've got a document you can go to, and if you can't remember from what occurred last year, the information's there, you can get it straight away. My memory as I get older is absolutely terrible, so I write as much stuff down as I can. In that way I don't need to remember it. As long as I know I can remember where I can find it, then I can understand what it's telling me. Emergency traffic plans. There are evacuation plans from Bridgetown. Certain routes that will be open, certain routes that will be closed. So if you've got a business in Bridgetown, then you need a copy of that. If you're going to evacuate your factory, which way are you going to go? You don't want to go to the east only to find out that the roads are blocked and you have to go back west again. And these are things that are dynamic. They may change every year as new roads are made or new traffic systems are developed. So you need to keep copies of the traffic plans. Again, states of readiness, I kind of alluded to that already. And then the other thing that we've got in ours is basically a roadmap of Barbados. You can get a ordnance survey map that are about $50, which gives you most of the roads in Barbados and the contours and everything else. But it's a good document to have because if you've got an employee that's in some little village somewhere, you may have to go there and find it, never having been there before. So, you know, a road map is kind of important. The general information, if you go to the Department of Emergency Management and use that address at the bottom there, that will give you a folder of about 50 pages that relates to most of the things that I've just spoken about. So just by printing 50 pages, you've got the first bit of your business recovery plan. Easy, yeah? We want to make this thing easy because everybody needs to do it. And there's other information on there too. So I don't think all of it is up to date because I checked on the names of the hurricanes for this year, and I think the one that's been presented, it was for 2016, so they're a little behind there. But I would believe that it's been revised. But definitely that address there will get you a good starting document. Then the next thing, this is the next section now. We've done the general information section. Now we're talking about communications. And this is a key component of a business recovery plan. It's basically covers a number of different things, one of which could be a pre-season staff briefing, the things that you need to discuss with your staff, the fact that every year you may make changes to your business recovery plan. The one that we use at BRC, I don't think you'll be able to see from there, but at the top of each page, we've got a header with a reference number and a revision number and a revision date. So as things develop, we continually updating, and then you can also make sure that everybody's got the right revision. Okay? So annual training, you can note that down, the topics and the headings that you need to look at. And most importantly, a revised staff contact list. we've got a list of every employee shown in a hierarchical form, every name, every telephone number, every address. Even our delivery drivers are in that listing. So that the idea being, well, we'll talk about that a little later, but the idea being that every manager can contact all of his staff and say, how did you do? Are you okay? Do you need any help? When can you come back to work? So that's kind of important, but obviously revised every year. You've got new staff, you've got staff that left, staff that have retired, so that needs to be done every year. And Robin at the back there, he's a communications guy, so he's the one that creates that document every year, and then it's circulated amongst all our staff. Essential service contacts, which can be Light and Power, Department of Emergency Management, police, ambulance, QEH, whatever. So emergency contacts, customer contacts. You may have all your customers on your phone, which is fine, but then you can't charge your phone, or your phone got wet. A document in a plastic cover. It's a little old-fashioned, but you can find the numbers that you need. So don't rely too much on technology. It kind of occurred to me recently that nowadays I don't remember numbers anymore. I don't even know my wife's cell phone number. I have to go in the thing to find it. I just don't remember numbers. And I think maybe a lot of us are the same. Key numbers that we used to carry 20, 30, 40 numbers in his heads years ago, and now it's here. So that's kind of important. We also got a listing for all the managers at BRC, and again it gives the same information, their address, the telephone number, the email address, but then there's directions to where they live. Because if you had to assist a manager or go and collect a manager to bring them into work, a tree's fell on the car. If you've got a direction, you can go straight there. You're not saying, well, where do I go, blah, blah, blah. Cell phones might be down. So, you know, it's all information that you may use. You may not use it, you may never use it, but it's there if you need to do it. And you only need to do it once. And then I also put some notes on dealing with the media. If you're a small company and something's gone drastically wrong with your company during a storm, then the media may come to you for answers or asking questions. So a short few lines on dealing with the media could be quite important. So for example, the worst thing you can ever say to media is no comment, no comment. The best thing you can say, if you've not got anything to say, is we don't have all the facts yet. Please leave it with me. We'll contact you as soon as we get accurate information. And that's a lot better way of dealing with the media than it is to say no comment, because that always looks like hiding something. So even a little section on dealing with the media could be quite important, especially even if it only states the general manager is the only one that talks to the media. Otherwise, everybody might be asked for an opinion, and every opinion might be different. So we're taking a little longer than I thought. I'm not boring you guys, am I? Oh, good, all right. So the other thing is pre-event tasks. And these are going to be prompted by your risk appraisals and hazard appraisals. Where is your exposure? And then you're going to develop things that you could develop it on two levels. One is, I need to get these things fixed, would be one level. But the other level would be, we've got so many glass windows, we're going to need to tape those windows. You know, so there's very simple things that you can do, that you can detail. Things like backup of records and protection of hardware. All our laptops, well, not so much the laptops, but all our desktops are all put into a storeroom that's locked up, that's in a dry area, very highly protected area, in order that they can't be flooded out or damaged. And then after the storm, they're all put back in place again. So little things like that, so that nothing's missed. Protection of equipment and other assets. If you've got, like BRC, a number of fairly large pieces of equipment, then you need to protect it. You need to cover it down, protect it against the rain, maybe protect it against things falling on it. Control panels, particularly susceptible to damage. Something falls on a control panel and the screen's broken, now the machine's down, could take you weeks or months to replace it. So we've got plastic that we cover machines down with. We've got covers, metal covers that go over control panels in order to offer some degree of protection, so that the machine is protected, and all we need to do is to rip off all of the plastic and go again once the storm has passed. Protection of inventory, we kind of spoke about that before. What kind of inventory have you got? How durable is it? Protection of equipment and other assets, sorry, just talked about that. Building security, how secure can you make your building? And then all the on-site activity, which is actually the shutdown. A listing of all the things that you need to do in order to close down your business. Now, pre-event tasks. So these identify and detail the activities that are to be performed to reduce damage. So you've done your appraisals, and now you're saying there's some risk from that particular area. So we need to identify all the things that you need to do to prepare. I alluded earlier to when I worked on the submarine, and one of the boxes that needed to be ticked was remove 7 tons of lead from the submarine, which was a very simple thing to tick, but not so easy to do. But you need to catalogue it in a checklist. Now, within that checklist as well, you should be looking at other things. One is a time duration. How long will that task take? If that task takes 6 hours and every other task in the plant takes 20 minutes, then your shutdown time is 6 hours. You need to start 6 hours earlier in order that everybody can go home at the same time, right? On that particular piece of equipment. So not only are you identifying the things that need to be done to protect the business, but you're also saying how long they will take. Also, you're assigning responsibility for having these things done. In our case, it usually boils down to the managers of each department. So a production manager will do his area. Office manager S will do her area. Robin will do his area. Sales and marketing manager, he'll do his area. Dispatch manager, he's got an area to deal with and a list of things that he has to do, that he is responsible for. And the other thing that would appear on that, the pre-event tasks, is also contingency items, which we'll talk again about. I'll show you actually what that includes shortly. But contingency items are items that you will need to do that task. Because if you've got a particular task to do, let's say it's covering down a machine. In the case of BRC, there's probably 3 things that we would use. One would be plastic sheet. 2 would be lots of duct tape. 3 would be protective covers for the control panels. So the contingency item for shutting down a piece of equipment would be one protective screen panel, one roll of polythene, two rolls of duct tape. And collectively, you'd look at all the uses for that within the plant, and somewhere you would have an inventory exclusively for your business recovery shutdown, where you would have 20 rolls of polythene, 50 rolls of duct tape, and it's sat there waiting for you to use for that particular activity. And the idea is that you don't want to be scratching your head and saying, oh, we've got to go to H&B, we need duct tape, we need polythene. You've got it already because you know you're going to use it in the event of a shutdown. So a contingency list of items is kind of important, because it's no good having a list of things to do and not having the items to do it. Once again, kind of just reinforcing the pre-event tasks, which is documenting and reviewing the shutdown process. It will identify tasks and responsibilities, so you'll know all the things that you need to do and the people who are accountable for doing those tasks. It offers means of your shutdown period. And don't forget, if you were looking at closure due to weather, maybe one of the things that you need to do is say, what is the last bus from Bridgetown? And let's aim to have all our guys away 2 hours before that last bus, because not everybody's got the advantage of a car. So you've got to be thinking well ahead, and you know then, once you've got those time periods, you can back up, do what you need to do, and get everybody away in order that they can go and make their preparations too. From experience, I've seen a lot of indecision of businesses closing down, saying, oh, who's going to make the call? Because if you make a bad call, you're the one that everybody may point at. But there's no bad calls if a hurricane's coming. None of us have got a crystal ball. We need to look at it practically and say, if this thing's going to get here in 12 hours, I'd like all our guys to be at home at least 6 hours before it gets here, because they've got their things to do too. So all of that timing can be determined by your pre-event tasks. As you list things to do, it also further defines detail. So you decide, we're going to do this, and then you think, oh, we need to do that as well. And on that process goes. So purely documenting the process will lead to more detail, because it makes you focus on things. And obviously it offers a guide to ensure that nothing is omitted. You've done as much as you possibly can to prepare. So it's not an easy job, but it's not that difficult. Quite simply, it's a checklist. So just prepare a checklist that can be signed off. And each manager signs off their checklist, and then it says to me, Pete, my department's done. I check my checklist. Production done. Sales done. When I've got all my boxes ticked, then I call Mr. Williams or whoever's in charge at the time and say, BRC ready, we're out of here. So there's that hierarchy of control. We've kind of alluded to that second point there. The longest task to be completed, or series of tasks to be completed, will determine your shutdown time. So once you've made that appraisal, you can determine how long you're going to need to shut down and get your people away. Now, this is just to kind of illustrate the detail in it. Obviously, a plan goes through an evolution. You start doing some very, very basic things, and then as you get into it more and more, you see more and more detail. So basically, one of the aspects of our plan is within the BRC buildings, we've got 2 buildings with 2 bays, approximately 400 feet long. And in each bay, we've got 3 cranes. So we said what we would do is we'd put 1 crane in each bay to the west and 2 cranes to the east. And the reason for having 2 cranes to the east, in one particular area, we've got our office complex, which would add more protection to those cranes. Now, so we park the cranes down at one end of the building next to each other. And the reason for that then is that between the end of the bay and this end of the bay, we've got an open expanse. So if one crane's broken, we can still use the other crane along the entire stretch of the building. So again, it may never be an issue, but at least you've thought through a simple thing like where do you park the cranes? You don't just leave them. The other thing as well is, I don't think you can see from the picture, but they raise the hook right up to the drum. And the reason for that is that when a wind's blowing and that hook's banging about, it could mash up anything in the area. So once you've once you've lifted the hook to the drum, it's not going to go too far. And then the other thing is the controls, the pennant cables with all the buttons for making it go up and down. That goes into a plastic bag, and that is taped to a pillar or something so that that's not flailing about in the wind. So all of these kind of attention to details hopefully will mean that when you come back, you turn on the breaker, you take the bag off the control, and you're moving your crane, and you're ready to do business. And this is, I don't know whether you can see that there, but this is kind of the format of our business recovery plan. If you look down the bottom there, it says gantry cranes. Park gantry crane in correct locations. Number 1, number 2, and number 4 east. Number 3, number 5, and number 6 west. Raise blocks to drum. Wrap controls in plastic and secure control to a column or in a fashion that will prevent it getting damaged. There's a time there that says 5 minutes. And then in the contingency items, it says polythene and duct tape. That's what you're going to need to do that job. And then there's a blank space where you can put your signature or your tick to say it's been done. Okay? So again, it's not rocket science. It's just a case of walking around with a pad, making notes, and seeing where there's potential threat, risk, hazard in the event of bad weather. Yeah, I alluded to this earlier. This is talking about contingency items. So these are all the things that you may need or will need in order to facilitate a shutdown or indeed to open up the business. So we talk about shutdown items. It's predominantly things like control panel covers, duct tape, polythene, that kind of thing. But we also have got contingency items that we put away which are post-incident. Now obviously BRC is a fairly big company with a big turnover, so we've probably overdone it a little, but we want to be able to get back into business. So things for bouncing back, post-incident contingency items would be things like cargo straps. for securing things on vehicles, maybe, or picking up, collecting wood. Nails, we've got a lot of nails, so maybe you have to shore something up, or box a window, or something like that. Flashlights, batteries, hand saws, hammers, light bulbs. So all they're stored in a contingency area, and we audit them every year. So at the end of May, everyone will be counted, and if people have used some throughout the year, then we get them all back up to numbers, and we know that we're going into the season ready. The other thing about some contingency items is that you may wish to rotate them out. So every year, at the end of the hurricane season, we'll take out the polythene and use that and put some new polythene back in when we go into the following year. So that's contingency items. So it's an important thing to have. And again, this is part of the list of the items that we have stored away. We've got, just to read at random, rolls of polythene, 2-inch wood nails, 3-inch wood nails, 4-inch wood nails, portable floodlights, extension leads, jump leads, heavy duty battery jump leads, claw hammers, hand saws, 4 tarpaulins, flashlights. So these are all things that may be of value. The fact that we've never really had a hard hit, we've never really qualified whether all these are justified, but you've got to try and kind of, some of it you may just need to guess, what would I need in the aftermath of a storm. Other items, well, you could put those in, but these usually would be items that you would have in your general listing of things that you would put aside, but you could use them in contingency as well. So for example, it may not hurt to have some large tins of tinned fruit. If you've got people working all night, Chefette may not be open, Burger King may not be open, so some very basic things like bottled water, maybe tinned fruit that somebody can, get the sugar into them while they're working. So it may be very basic, but it's things that you may need to think about. Water filter cartridges. If there's been a lot of damage to water lines, obviously we all know that the first thing that comes through is sludge. And if you've got water filters, they're probably going to block straight away. So you'd need to flush your lines, put new filters in. Again, contingency items. And like I say, at the bottom there, there's reference to, you can call the Department of Emergency Management, and they'll give you a big long list of things that you can put on your list. So, if you've done a good job, then you should be able to leave in quick time and be secure in the knowledge that everything is as good as it can be to weather the storm. Everything that you can think about has been thought about, everything that you can do within reason has been done, and the only thing then to do is to keep your fingers crossed and hope that everything's going to go good. And then we get the storm. So, returning, the first thing you should do, really, is appraise your staff. How did your staff get through? If you've got no staff available, then getting your business back together is not going to work. So you need to appraise, how did your staff get through? Some people may have lost a roof, and some people may have lost a house, or some people may have got through it without an issue and say, I'll come into work this afternoon. But for the people who've lost a roof, if you've got sufficient staff, you may be able to say, well, we'll send a couple of guys over to just help you patch up. But obviously, by that time, it's got to be a team effort. And it can't be just a focus on the business. It's got to be a collective focus on everybody coming back to life again. So looking at the staff appraisal, this is another part of the recovery plan, which is appraising your staff. How did they get through? Do they need any assistance of any sorts? It might be somebody who forgot to get blood pressure medicine and their car's damaged. They're all things that you could help people with. And then finding out who can you really count on to return to work. And you can't expect people to come to work if they're rebuilding a house and putting the property back together. So it's basically making that appraisal too, that out of 50 employees, we've got 20 coming in. And of those 20, how are we going to allocate them, and how are we going to do the things that we need to do to both help our staff and bounce back. And basically, in this case, the BRC managers of departments are charged with calling all of their staff and asking, how did you get through? When can you get back to work? Is there anything that you need desperately? And that is covered on another check sheet, which is very simple. The manager's name, the name of the individual, a contact number that you managed to get through to that individual on, the status and their location, and then what priority. And basically we were looking at 3 priorities. 1 is major damage, 2 is, well, I kind of got through, but kind of in the middle, and then 3 is no problem, going to be back at work soon. So if you keep your priorities really simple, it forces you to make decisions about which one is relevant. And so you can then decide on whether you're going to assist anybody or help anybody that may need serious assistance. And then when we start talking about returning and restarting the business, then there's basically a process that we need to go through. And again, this is all documented in the business recovery plan. And the first thing we need to look at is safety. Is the building safe? Are the power cables exposed? Are the power cables down? What happens when the power comes back on? Are the big shards of glass hanging out the windows? So you don't want to send your people back into a situation where the place is basically unsafe. So the first thing to do on the return to work will be to do an appraisal of safety. How safe is the property, the building, the area that people are going to be expected to work in. The next thing to look at is security. That means making secure the building. If there's no roofing and you've got electronic equipment, you're going to leave it bagged and tagged until you put some kind of cover over it, right? You don't want people to have ready access if you've got a bakery, because that's maybe a desirable product that people can come in and take away. Like I say, steel for us is not a big deal. If you've got a 3-ton truck and you can lift it on the truck, then fine. But what are you going to do with it when you've got it? So our inventory is relatively safe. So security is the next thing that you need to look at. Following that, we then look at technical. What damage has occurred? What technical work do we need to do in order to bring things back up online? And then finally, the systems, the internal systems of the plan. Now, technical and systems can kind of run at the same time, but if you're going to start business, it's not only a case of having the equipment ready to make the product, but you've got to have invoicing and all the other paperwork bits, and you've got to have cash available. So you've got to get all of these systems in place in order that you can start to do business again. So that's kind of the recommended process: safety, security, technical, and systems. That just basically goes through what I've just kind of spoken about. Safety, securing the area from a safe point of view. Security, protection from the elements, or protection from further damage. Avoiding theft and that kind of thing, so securing the building. Technical, damage repair, or making ready machinery, and then systems. And then we have another document which is damage appraisal. So again, it depends on how complex your business is, how much equipment you have, will determine whether you need to prioritize your repairs. It could be the extent of the damage too. But remember when we talked about process focus, if we had extensive damage at BRC, the only things we're going to look at is roofing machines. That's what our important process is. So all the technical effort would go onto that. But when we look at damage appraisal, we do it on a 1, 2, 3 system. Basically, immediate will be safety, threats and hazards. 2 will be required, essential repairs of key equipment that enables the business key products. And then 3, don't even worry about that. Nothing of major consequence. And that basically is a check sheet. Again, it's real simple, but the idea is to formalize the thinking process in order that you can prioritize where your efforts need to be with possible limited resources. And then post-incident would be after everything's cleared up and everything's working well, then you need to note any omissions. What have we learned from this scenario? What did we not anticipate? What could we have done better? Maybe timings were off. Things took longer than you thought, or maybe even shorter. Now people are getting more accustomed to doing a shutdown. Maybe they can snip some time off that shutdown process because everybody's familiar. Reviewing the performance of the staff. Well, I don't think you did this very well. This needed more detail. But again, it's a review to see how an actual situation was dealt with and what improvements can be made. And then obviously you amend your system and you write a revision. And not only do you write the revision, but you communicate the revision in future pre-season so that everybody knows what they've got to do. So that's kind of the loop. And then the annual review, you look at it in terms of changes of staff. People have retired, people have left, you guys have started. Change your addition of equipment. If you've got any new equipment, then you need to make protective covers for it. You need to add more contingency items to cover it down. Changes in process or product. Change of possible risk or threats. Maybe there's a new process that needs dangerous chemicals, I don't know, but review it in context of what new hazards or threats may now be there that weren't there previously. Change your contingency items, and then review and edit all your checklists. Annual review, staff briefing and training to both reinforce and familiarise with updates and expectations of management. and audit contingency items. And with that, we come to an end.